talk, as Haley just so eloquently just described, the abuse and misogyny that's in a lot of mainstream porn. And that is a huge problem, a serious problem, and I think that a lot of organizations here, as well as Haley and Naysayer they're doing a great job tackling it. But I'm going to come at it from a little bit different perspective and talk about the effects on a porn user at a more subconscious, neurological, and physiological level. And my hope today by doing that is to give y'all an answer to a very important question, and that is, what is porn doing to children? What is porn doing to young adolescent users who grow up with this unlimited access to content? In 2011, psychologist Philip Zimbardo gave an awesome TED Talk titled The Demise of Guys. In that talk, he pointed out two important things. One, guys were losing their drive and motivation to be successful, maybe get a good job, maybe just achieve their goals, whatever that may be. But he also pointed out that a lot of guys, in increasing numbers, are flaking out sexually with women. They're getting to a point where they're becoming impotent, and they can no longer function with their partners. However, he was not the first to suggest this. In 2007, psychiatrist Norman Doidge wrote his New York Times best-selling book, The Brain That Changes Itself. It's an amazing book. I highly encourage everyone to check it out. In that book, he dedicated an entire chapter on sexuality, chapter 4. And I want to read y'all a quote where he's describing this new phenomenon he was seeing brought on by what he believed was internet porn use and its increasing access. He said, during the mid to late 1990s, when the internet was growing rapidly and pornography was exploding on it, I treated or assessed a number of men who all had essentially the same story. They reported increasing difficulty being turned on by their actual partners, spouses, or girlfriends, though they still considered them objectively attractive. Now, I know what Doidge and Zimbardo, what they were describing is legit and it's true because it happened to me. So I want to give you a little background and context of where I'm coming from. So I'm 28 now, and I grew up as a part of the first generation that could watch whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted, for as long as we wanted, and we could do this all anonymously, and we could do it for free through list sites and later on down the line tube sites. We didn't have to pay for anything, and it was a lot easier than trying to, lift our parents' mattress up and get a Playboy magazine or something like that. But not only did we have unlimited access to all this free, easily available porn, we lacked any education on its potential negative effects. And in many cases, myself and a lot of my friends were told by a lot of sexologists and mainstream media that porn was sex positive and that it would increase our sex lives and lead to more sexual pleasure, or, as I'm sure everyone in this room has heard at some point, spice up the bedroom. Unfortunately, it took me a decade of porn use to realize that that wasn't reality, and that's not what happened in my case. So a few important things about my specific story is I was raised in a very loving, supportive environment. I didn't have any abuse or trauma as a kid. And I had, and the same is true for a lot of my friends, and there was no history of addiction in my family. I turned to porn because I liked it, I was told it was awesome, and I didn't know of any potential negative effects. So I was first exposed to porn at 8 years old. I was playing hide and go seek in my neighborhood with some friends, and I found a Playboy or Hustler magazine. And I knew what masturbation was, so I began masturbating to pictures then. And then fast forward 2 years, I was 10 years old, my family got cable TV, so I would stay up late at night after they thought I went to sleep, and I would masturbate to MTV and BET booty shaking videos, and also watch the, if you can remember 15, 20 years ago, if you were cheap and you didn't want to pay for porn and you watched the HBO porn channels, it was all squiggly, and you would wait for 15, minutes and see if the screen would clear up and you might get a glimpse of a glorious nipple in the top left corner of the screen. Some of y'all might be with me. I don't expect everyone to. But that's what I was doing as a little kid. I was 10 years old doing that late at night. Probably not the best thing for my developing brain, I'm sure, and I definitely came to find that out later. But things got really bad when I was 12, and that's when my family got high-speed internet. So I would ride my bike home from school and watch porn for a couple hours before my parents got home. And by the time I was out of middle school, I had seen just about everything there was on the internet, everything that Haley just described. I was watching, and I was exposed to it at some level or another. And I want to point out something very important. This was a normal part of teen culture. My friends and I at school would pass pieces of paper back and forth with websites of where we could watch free material and give each other tips and tricks of how we could hide it from our parents. Things like clear our history and delete your cookies and maybe pause a download at 99% so it doesn't save to your computer, stuff like that. And we would use file sharing sites back then. And it wasn't just in middle school, things escalated into high school. I went to a school up in Dallas that was one of the first, a part of the first school district to have the great idea of giving all the students their own laptops. So one of the first things we did was figure out how we can get around the block so we could play Super Smash Brothers and GoldenEye and video games. But the next thing we figured out how to do is get around the block so we could watch porn. So you had this scenario of myself and my friends on many occasions watching porn in class instead of getting our education. And we didn't just have it on our laptops. We had it on everything. I had it on my PSP, my PlayStation Portable, and if y'all don't know what that is, it's like a Game Boy. And if you don't know what that is, I cannot help you. And there was actually one instance specifically that I remember. I regret it, but I put my PSP behind my teacher while she was grading papers, and I played porn for the whole class to see. If I could go back in time, I'd punch myself in the face for being immature, inconsiderate, and disrespectful. But the reason I'm saying all this is because, for one, just to paint you a picture of how prevalent porn use was amongst me and my friends. It was everywhere. And two, and this one's a really important one because a lot of skeptics of porn problems will say that this is the main issue, we didn't have any shame around our porn use. We watched it happily and proud. We bragged about it. We were very open about our sexuality and our porn use. So, looking back, I can see all this now, and I didn't notice it was affecting me at the time. But in retrospect, I can tell that it was affecting our behavior and definitely affecting my sexuality. I became sexually active at the age of 14, and that's when my battle for pixels on a screen and my sex drive for real partners began. And through high school and into college, I continued watching porn and having real sex, but pixels on the screen ended up winning that battle. My drive for pixels increased, and my drive for partners decreased over time, ultimately leading to a time when I was 23 and I went to have sex with a beautiful girl, and my body could not respond. No matter how attracted to her I was, which I was very attracted to her, I liked her a lot. And I knew I wasn't nervous enough for that to happen because I had sexual experience and all that. But when we went to have sex, it felt like a completely asexual, like alien experience. Like my body didn't know what was going on. And I could not get the slightest bit of an erection no matter what we tried to do. So I freaked out. I was young, otherwise healthy, had no clue what was wrong with me. So I did what anyone would do. I got on Google and typed in young guy erection problem. And what I found completely blew my mind. In my search, I stumbled across forums all over the internet with thousands and thousands of guys with essentially the same story. That same story, I don't know if I changed the slide or not. Did I go back? That same story that Norman Doidge was just describing and Philip Zimbardo was describing. They all had the same story, that they used internet porn for several years and eventually got to a place where they could not function with the real partner, even a partner they were attracted to. So it's not the partner's fault. So, long story short, I decided to quit when I realized that was behind my problem. And quitting wasn't easy, but one thing that helped me along recovery was getting educated on the neuroscience behind addiction and the neuroscience behind sexual conditioning and how porn can alter our sexual template in our brain. But I also was staying really plugged into the recovery community, reading stories of successful guys and getting tips and advice from them, and also reading everything mainstream and following the debate of is porn causing problems or not, or is it really an addiction, blah, blah, blah. I was staying really tuned into that, and I noticed that there was tons of misconceptions out there on the topic. A lot of it was outdated historical arguments that no longer applied to our generation. And I want to cover a couple of those. The first misconception, and this is something a lot of naysayers and skeptics will say, is that the people who have porn addiction or porn-induced sexual dysfunctions always have some underlying pre-existing issue that drove them to use porn. Now, as I already pointed out, that wasn't the case for me. I didn't have any abuse or trauma that drove me to porn or shame or whatever, so I was embarrassed to have real sex or whatever. That wasn't the case. We used porn because we liked it, we lacked education, and we were told it was going to increase our sex lives. And then if you just think about it, a teenager or a young adolescent will naturally find porn interesting, pleasurable, arousing. Their adolescent brain is more vulnerable to addiction-related brain changes. The brain's frontal lobes won't fully develop until they're 25 or mid-20s or later. And they also are more vulnerable to sensitization and other brain changes that my man Noah is going to dig into in more depth in a little bit. So their brain is more vulnerable, and yet they have all this unlimited access, and they're chronically consuming it, leading to problems. And they have unlimited novelty. This isn't, the 80s where you could flip through a magazine once and then you can't get shocked anymore after that. We're talking when tube sites took off around 2005 when YouTube was created, you could now have multiple tabs open at the same time, watching 10 different videos of compilation scenes like highlight tapes of the best, most intense parts of pornos, and you could see 1,000 naked girls in a minute. It's a novelty that's never been matched before in human history, so it overstimulates a teenager's brain, or anyone's brain for that matter. And then lastly, the recipe for disaster is they're completely unaware that what they're doing can negatively harm them. So they don't have to have issues to lead to problems. The chronic consumption that kids are doing will lead to problems regardless of that or not. The next one I want to talk about is attractiveness. How can I word this simply? We always hear it talked about in conversations and just over coffee that, I try to compete with the porn stars. You'll hear that from a lot of partners and stuff like that. I can't compete with the photoshopped, big boob, blonde hair, whatever. Just those classic talking points that I'm sure all of y'all heard. Now, I want to say that porn addicts don't watch porn because the attractiveness of the porn stars. Now, to be fair, that might be true when you first start, but as soon as, you become desensitized, you start to seek and search things that become more about the shock, anxiety, fear that it produces in you. It becomes less about looks and more about genre, more about fetish. And then, for me, for example, I escalated into stuff that I was once repulsed by and disgusted by. And I promise you, looks was the last thing, well, not the last thing, but it was definitely not the reason why I was watching porn. I was craving novelty. I was craving a neurochemical rush. And whoever the actress was, I could care less. And this one's huge, and I hope that I can articulate this because I think it's important for all of y'all and what y'all do and if you get attacked by skeptics and naysayers. Let me say this. Moving into the future, our movement is going to be attacked because not all porn is misogynistic. They'll say that, Cindy Gallup comes to mind. She's the creator of Make Love, Not Porn.com. So if you debate her on TV or anything like that, you'll say, porn, we'll use the classic arguments of, porn doesn't teach kids healthy sexuality. It's going to lead to violence, like Haley's saying, and that is true, again, in some instances. But her comeback to that is going to be, not on my website. My website is porn between consenting, loving adults, and it's ethical and it's female-friendly. The good news is we all have a refutation for that, and that's neuroplasticity. Regardless of what genre of porn you're watching, you can wire your brain to it. So whether you're watching loving porn between a married couple or some college couple, or you're watching Homer and Marge Simpson go at it, that's cartoons and it's not real people being exploited, it can rewire your brain and lead to dysfunction. So when I stumbled across those forums, I found that tip of the iceberg, or I found the rest of the iceberg that Norman Doidge just saw the tip of back in 2006. There are now forums all over the internet with hundreds of thousands of guys with my stories or, different backgrounds. It's not just like mine, but we all chronically consume porn and it led to sexual dysfunctions or addiction or morphing sexual tastes. And this isn't just a small problem. Lots of research has been pouring out. Last month, a study by U.S. Navy urologists came out, and they documented this increase in sexual dysfunction among young men. And if you look at the stats, the research that's come out in the last 15 years shows that 2002 and before, ED rates for men 18 to 40-ish were 2 to 5%. And every study assessing young male sexuality since 2010 and after has ED rates around 30%. Now, are all those porn related? I'm not going to make that claim, but I think you can see a direct correlation there. And so let's answer the question. Let's answer the question of what is porn doing to kids? Because it's not just the sexual dysfunctions, there's other things. This is anorgasmia or delayed ejaculation. That can be a precursor to ED. So if you don't have erectile dysfunction yet, you might have difficulty climaxing with your real partner, where it either takes you forever to climax, or you can't, or you have to try really hard. And eventually it just becomes impossible, and they have to finish themselves off with their hand or stuff like that. Then you have erectile dysfunction. That's pretty simple. You can get it up with porn, but you can't without. In severe cases, I should say this, some guys get so desensitized that they can't even get it up with porn anymore. Brain fog and concentration problems, that happened to me. Nothing else in my life seemed interesting. I struggled to feel emotion. I struggled to connect with my partners, not just sexually, but emotionally. And it just becomes really hard to focus on anything else other than these pornified scripts you have playing in your mind all day, because that was just such a powerful memory and exciting, especially during your teenage years, that, paying attention to biology is the last thing you want to do. You're fantasizing about some girl in the class. Increased social anxiety, this happened to me too. I'm normally a pretty laid-back, chill dude, but in my depths of porn addiction, I became increasingly anxious, felt like all eyes were on me, stuff like that. Declining interest in real partners and real relationships. Now, I want to point out that this happens more like subconsciously. I don't know any guy that would be like, yeah, I'd rather jack off to porn than make love to my sexy wife or something like that. I don't know any guy that would actually say that. But that's what happens, right? So it happens more subconsciously, where you have low libido for real partners, even if you're not aware of it, and you have high drive to spend some fancy time with some pixels on a screen. The last one I'll talk about is escalating into more extreme material. What used to arouse you no longer does the trick. And again, I'm not going to get into the science, because Noah's going to do that. But basically, you start to seek and search more shocking material that ups the ante, ups the neurochemical rush. A survey on Alexander Rhodes' NoFap back in 2012 surveyed 1,500 guys and found that 56% of the users escalated into porn they once considered, let me get the wording right, deviant, right? So they escalated into stuff they were not interested in or considered deviant. Here's an important thing. 24% of those that escalated had shame. 32% of those that escalated did not have shame. So again, no shame around that porn use, even if you're watching some crazy stuff. This is important to point out, again, because if you get attacked by saying, oh yeah, it's just a moral problem, y'all just have shame, y'all are just trying to shame everybody, that's not reality. These guys, like myself and thousands of others on these forums, we didn't have shame and we still got screwed up. So that's important to point out to those haters. Our man Norman Deutsch helps explain how this happens. The content of what the patients, the guys, found exciting changed as websites introduced themes and scripts that altered their brains without their awareness. Because plasticity is competitive, the brain maps for new, exciting images increased at the expense of what had previously attracted them. A study kind of pointed this out in young adolescents. It investigated anal sex and the motivations behind it. It was on 16 to 18-year-olds, and this was in 2014. I want to point out the results. It found that anal heterosex, so this is heterosexuals, not homosexuals, often appeared to be painful, risky, and coercive, particularly for women. Interviewees frequently cited pornography as the explanation for anal sex. I want to point out a few important quotes that break my heart, and it's pretty telling. A young girl from the study simply said, obviously people enjoy it if they do it, but we know by just reading the study results that they're not doing it because they enjoy it, they're doing it because they see the actors on the screens enjoying it. And this quote is pretty telling. Let's look at it really closely and just kind of see the several different things that stand out to you. A young guy named Mark, I doubt that's his real name, and it's not important. But anyways, I think that the boy enjoys it. I think it's the boy that pushes for it from watching porn and stuff. And again, we're talking about anal sex. They want to try it. The girl is scared and thinks it's weird, and then they try it because the boyfriend wants them to. They normally don't enjoy it because they're scared, and I know that like with anal, if you're not willing, there's supposed to be a not in there. If you're not willing, you don't relax. Not willing, scared. So what you have happening in reality is young people manipulating and coercing their partners to do things that they don't enjoy doing because that's the new normal. And I'm guilty. I probably said the exact same paragraph as that Mark guy at some point in time in my life. So animal studies point out just how powerful this early sexual experience can be when we're specifically talking about adolescence. This study is one of my favorites, just talking about sexual conditioning. They had young male rats mate with they were both virgins, but male rats mate with female rats sprayed with cadaverine, which is the smell of rotting flesh. After they mated together, the newly conditioned rats played with and chewed on toys that were sprayed with that smell. The unconditioned rats that never tied that in with their sexuality, they would run away from it, they were repulsed by it, and they'd stay far away. So this kind of helps explain how you can escalate and wire your brain to pretty weird stuff if rats are aroused by rotting flesh. So do you even science? We get attacked by, just a small minority of vocal naysayers, but they say that there's no evidence for any of this, and that is just absurd. We have now 26 plus brain studies on porn users that are consistent with 170 internet addiction brain studies that all support the addiction model. 26 studies. We usually only cite one or two of them, but there's 26. And we also have 10, not 9, neuroscience-based reviews of their literature. It's coming out faster than my slides can keep up. And we also have multiple case studies that document young guys with unexplained erectile dysfunction and low libido that recover by removing the porn use. So we have case studies. Everyone hear me. There's 3 of them already out that document young guys recovering from ED by removing porn. That's important to realize. And you can find all of those studies listed for your viewing convenience on yourbrainonporn.com. Thank you, Gary. So Naysayer talking points. I catch a lot of heat when I'm talking publicly about this. They say I'm full of crap and making stuff up. A couple of their talking points that I just want to point out because y'all might hear them in conversations when y'all talk about this moving forward. They'll say that rates haven't gone up. It's just that Viagra came out and now more men are willing to speak up about it. One big problem with that, these rates are from anonymous questionnaires, not men willing to show their face in their doctor's office. And ironically, in contradicting themselves, they say that, oh no, the problem is actually just too much shame. So they need to decide which way to go with that one. And they'll also say that it's just a refractory period, and this one makes me laugh because it took me 9 months to have successful sex. I don't know any young man that needs 9 months in between rounds. Or they'll say it's performance anxiety. This is shut out by the porn-induced ED test. So the porn-induced ED test is really simple. See if you can get it up with porn. See if you can masturbate without porn. Because if you can't masturbate without porn, you're not nervous because you don't care about sexually satisfying your own hand. And if you can get it up with porn, you don't have an organic problem because simply watching porn doesn't magically make cardiovascular disease go away. I did that test when I first stumbled across this problem. I tried to masturbate without porn. What a novel idea. I haven't done that in a decade because I always had porn every time I did it. And I realized I couldn't. No matter how hard I'm not going to get graphic. Reel it in, Gabe, reel it in. No matter what I fantasized about or what I did to myself, I couldn't get it up. But when I ran back into my bedroom, turned on porn, I instantly got an erection. I was dependent on porn to function, and it couldn't be any more clearer. And not only that, I recovered after I gave up porn, so. Okay, I keep hitting the back button, I apologize. So what we have is a public health crisis. Now, I know it's not typically talked about it as this graphic on users or whatever, but it is part of the problem of the public health crisis. Haley pointed out very well that there's other issues here. It's changing not just young users, but the whole relationship dynamic and what young couples think is normal. But if you go on these forums and just type in something like I did, this is an actual screenshot that I just did a little bit ago. I typed in suicide, and I have 26 pages of young guys contemplating killing themselves because they are screwed up by porn. I think I'm about to cry. This is kind of what happened to me when I was recovering. I got really sad, and I went through a little depression. I was screwed up, and I didn't know if I would ever recover. I've never cried when I talk before, and I'm about to. This is really weird. This is a serious issue. Young people are screwing themselves up emotionally, mentally, and physically. Can't believe I'm crying. But there's hope. There's hope. There's hope because, thank you. This is very weird for me. There are now thousands and thousands of success stories all over the internet that Gary has accumulated, and I have some pouring through on my site daily, and I know other organizations have tons of recovery stories as well. But people can recover from this, and it's beautiful, and Norman Doidge's book points this out. The brain can change, and the brain can rewire, so it's not such a depressing message because there is hope, and guys are recovering like myself and Noah and Alexander. We're recovering and getting our lives back. We're getting our zest for life back, not just our sexual function. I'm happy about that, but also just the ability to feel emotions and, just giving up porn. I can't even put it in words, my different perspective on life. I originally quit so I could have tons of sex, but as my brain changed, I started to feel more empathy and emotion, and I'm here now, so it's pretty crazy what it can do. So solutions are always good to end with. I think we need to raise awareness, get this information out there, share it, so that people can make informed decisions. I myself, and some of y'all can disagree with me, whatever, but I'm not for banning. I think education is the key. I want to raise awareness. Through education, I think that's the best way to do it. Teach these young kids the neuroscience behind how porn can affect them. I stayed away from hard drugs as a kid because I knew of the potential negative effects. I had no clue about porn, so I consumed it. And I think we need to do a better job protecting kids. So I'm all for mandatory filters on anyone under 18. I think we need to all push for that. We talked about it in a meeting. We're going to be working on that, and I think we can do a better job. Again, I'm just thankful to have this opportunity to share. I think in the future we'll look back on this time in humanity's history, this pivotal moment, and we're going to say, how foolish they were for having children have unlimited access to the internet with little education. So help me, help you, raise awareness and educate the world so that that doesn't happen.